This week on the PRESSURECAST, Rockstar Games comes to the Switch, Blizzard builds an esports arena, and we discuss getting good. It's Monday, September 11th, 2017. Everything that happened in the world of video games is here, now, on the PRESSURECAST. Hey, Pressure Pals, welcome to the 198th episode of the PRESSURECAST, the weekly video game news panic that posts every single Monday on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, TuneIn Radio, Google Play Music, and America's longest-running independent newspaper at ShepherdExpress.com. If you want to find the audio or video version of this episode, please check the description on this YouTube video or on your podcast app, and you'll find all the links right there, as well as all the links to contact the show through email, Twitter, lots of places, so check that out. But man, what a week it has been. I've been playing a lot of Destiny 2, which is really fun, actually, more so than I expected. I wasn't a huge fan of the original Destiny. It was fun to play with friends. It wasn't so much fun to play by yourself, but I have not actually teamed up with anyone so far while playing Destiny 2, and I'm still having a blast. It just has that really tight, God, it's actually very difficult to describe exactly why it works so well. It's just that signature Bungie style shooting that you saw definitely in Halo or all the way back in things like Marathon. It's just interesting to see how this company has grown, but they still use these repeated themes over and over and over again, like the idea of only being able to carry two weapons, and one is like an energy weapon that takes down shields, and the other one is a weapon that takes down like physical matter. The idea that there's competing enemies, like you're just one part of a bigger storyline, so you might walk into a scenario and see two different like enemy types fighting each other because they don't get along, and it makes the universe just feel bigger, and that's, man, Destiny 2, it's really good, surprisingly good. So if you're on the fence, I'd say probably give it a try, especially if you do have friends online. I'm sure it's even better. But we'll definitely be talking about Destiny 2 later in the show when we get to the chart park. And obviously we're going to be, talking all about the upcoming video games and the hype train. And we're going to be talking about the things that happened 10 years ago and beyond in strong history. But first, we have to get to something else. It's time right now to chat back to you, dear listener and viewer, when I ask you a question and you tell me what's what. It's a little something we like to call Tell Me, Goddammit. Yes, it is Tell Me, Goddammit. So last week I asked you, dear listener and viewer, to tell me, goddammit, what is your favorite piece of downloadable content? Which seems like a pretty controversial question. After all, DLC is often messed with distrust and skepticism. But hey, if you bought enough of it, you're bound to find some DLC you actually liked. Also, the bonus question was about DLC you wish existed. So DLC that doesn't exist, but you'd like to see happen because it would make a game you already enjoy even greater. So let's start with Joe. Here's what Joe had to say. My favorite piece of DLC is Undead Nightmare for Red Dead Redemption. I absolutely loved Red Dead Redemption, but I was a little nervous when I first heard about this expansion as I couldn't picture this silly sounding idea working in the very serious world the game had established. Oddly enough, that's exactly what I love about the DLC. Rockstar does humor very well in its games, and adding levity and horror schlock to a game that already had a somber story somehow ended up working really well. To me, Undead Nightmare represents the best of what DLC can be by giving you more of the game you already love, but recontextualizing things that make a whole new experience from it. End quote. That was a lot of syllables. Recontextualizing. I like it. And truth be told, this is probably going to be my answer as well, which really shouldn't come as a surprise because Undead Nightmare is often regarded as the best DLC of all time. And I'd like to think that's because Rockstar took their time to fully realize a vision. Now, oftentimes when you have DLC, it's just like a single item. Or maybe it's a location, a map, a piece of clothing, a weapon. And that's all well and good, depending on the quality of the item. But to tell a complete story, which can only work if the audience is already familiar with the original game, that's exactly what DLC should be. And that's a story that can only be told through DLC. But, I'm not trying to box in the platform of what DLC can and should be, but for me personally, that was the best. It took the places and the characters that the players were, they knew very well because they had explored them for over 40 hours, and then gave them just a slight twist, gave every environment just a slight twist, but they committed to that slight twist throughout a gigantic open world, so it just made it feel bigger. Like, it felt like a real event. And also, the cutscenes were really fucked up. So, awesome answer. I really like that answer. Let's go over to Damn You Salazar, who chimed in saying his dream DLC, so a DLC that doesn't exist, but one he'd like to say is this. Quote, one piece of DLC I want is in the Master Chief Collection, and I basically want a current gen upgrade to Halo Reach. It's the only thing the Master Chief Collection doesn't have and keeps it from feeling complete. Okay, end quote. Alright, let's talk about this once again. Tell me goddammit. The premise of Tell Me Goddammit is where dreams come true. Reality is not a factor whatsoever, so it's only your deepest desire. Doesn't matter if it's actually going to come to pass. And, now that all of the Halo games are coming to backwards compatibility, and Halo Reach is already in backwards compatibility, it sounds like the Master Chief Collection is dead. That's not going to happen. But I have to agree with you, Damn You Salazar. It was really weird that they left Reach out of the collection. They even include Halo 3 ODST. Now, personally speaking, Reach was my second favorite Halo game. I love the first Halo, and then I love Halo Reach. Those are like my two favorite Halo experiences. Now, obviously, the story in Reach was fantastic, and it had one of the best video games of that entire generation. I don't want to spoil it in case anyone here is actually going to go play it, but it's a real good ending. But the multiplayer was totally underrated. They introduced jetpacks and sprinting already to the standard Halo systems, and I would say more so than Part 4 or Part 5. I feel like they really created a way for sprinting to work in that universe that didn't feel too distant from like the core Halo franchise. Now, some fans have said that Reach went too far with the things that they added on top of it, but look at Destiny 2. Bungie basically made Halo again, except everyone can sprint and has a jetpack. So Destiny 2, when I'm playing this, I'm like, this feels a lot like the multiplayer from Reach. Think about that. On the plus side, like I mentioned, Reach is backwards compatible, and after a few patches, I guess it works great on the Xbox One. When they originally released it, there were some issues. Still, I have to agree with you. It was weird. Why didn't they include Reach on the Master Chief Collection? It deserved to be there. It was the last Halo game made by Bungie, and that's a big deal. Anyway, Sasuke27013 also responded saying, quote, the only season pass I ever bought was Project Diva Future Tone season pass, so more season passes with more songs and outfits to add to the Future Tones already pack 236 songs would be the only season pass I would buy. Okay, so basically we're talking about a rhythm game, and I totally agree. Like, personally speaking, I love rhythm game DLC because it is such a simple concept and it always works perfectly because you're playing a rhythm game because you want more songs. Alright, well, here's some more songs. It's great, isn't it? And I was the exact same way with Beatles Rock Band back in 2009, which of course it is the 8th anniversary of Beatles Rock Band. I'll never be able to cover it in strong history, so I wanted to mention that right here. But back with Beatles Rock Band, I bought every single song pack and I played them so much that I forgot that they were ever DLC because they fit in so well. So DLC that gives you more of the thing that you already love and fits in perfectly with the package that it initially came in. That's another great concept for DLC, so more of that music for Hatsune Miku? Yeah, that makes sense to me. Now, Pixel Hans has both a favorite DLC and a dream DLC. That's above and beyond right there, Pixel Hans. Here's what he said, quote, my favorite DLC would have to be the Dark Souls 2 Season Pass. Awesome new arena bosses and gear. The new arenas are also far better than everything else that was in the base game. Now here's his dream DLC. Some badass Shenmue Cross Yakuza crossover. Give me the towns from Shenmue 1 and 2 with Yakuza gameplay, and of course a Ryo costume or model for Kiryu. You know what? Just let Yakuza Team remake Yakuza 1 and 2. Do it, Sega. End quote. Okay. I like that idea. We'll talk about that in a moment. But yes, I never actually played the DLC for Dark Souls 2 because I didn't particularly like Dark Souls 2 as a game. I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as the first one, but I've always heard this from a lot of people that the DLC in Dark Souls 2 is so good it will make you want to actually get farther in the base game. And that's insane. Like, when DLC is actually better than the game that it came with, there's another great example. And to be clear, I don't hate Dark Souls 2 at all. I think it had a lot to do with the name. Like, had I gone in there with, if they'd called it like Dark Smoles or something, and if they're like, this isn't the sequel to Dark Souls, I would have gone in there with totally different expectations, because Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3, they feel a lot alike, even though they're really different games. But Dark Souls 2, it's really odd. There's not as much verticality. It's a lot of flat land that just It's a game that is designed horizontally instead of vertically, if that makes any sense. But yeah, not a bad game by any means, just one that didn't really click with me personally, but I always wanted to check out that DLC just because of the positive response it got. Alright, now as for this whole Shenmue Cross Yakuza business, Pixel Hans, buddy, think about this for a second. In 1987, Ryo is in China and Kazuma is presumably in Japan. At least that's my best guess based off of Yakuza 0. Also, did you know that Kazuma is only 4 months older than Ryo? They were both born in 1968. But anyway, Ryo is in what was the name of the first town? Yaonose? Whatever. That's a fictional Japanese town, but basically it's on the other side of Japan. And then you got Kiryu, who's over in Tokyo, so there's no way they're going to interact. But don't worry, Pixel Hans, I know what you're thinking, and I am right there with you. Ryo he's racing his forklift like he does in Disc 3 of Shenmue, so this will be in canon, this will be in the universe, and he takes a turn a little too hard, he goes out of control, and he accidentally creates a rip in the space-time continuum. Now, this would take him into the far-flung future and the city of Tokyo-to, where gangs of rollerblading teens who spray graffiti everywhere are currently ruling the streets. Now, elsewhere, Kazuma, in let's just say like, I don't know, 2002 or whatever, while he's still in prison, right? He's in prison, but the guards agree to let him out early if he takes part in an experiment for time travel. But instead he turns them down and he tries to dig his way out of jail, but he digs so fast that he also falls into a time portal. And then together, Ryo and Kazuma run roughshod over Tokyo-to and their magnetic rollerblades before joining the Daytona USA tournament. I think it's safe to say that is exactly what everyone wants. So there you go, Pixel Hans, 1-to-1. I knew exactly what you meant when you wrote that email right there. It's I get it. Well, thank you everyone for all those thoughtful responses. They were good responses. Some that I never even really would have considered. That Dark Souls 2. Awesome answer. But now we're going to look forward to next week. And we're going to be talking a little bit about esports later on as the show goes on, because of course MOBAs and CSGO are attracting millions of viewers every single year. But my question to you, dear listener and viewer, is let's broaden this out. Let's look at all the video games out there and let's pick a game. What game would you like to see treated as a hardcore big money esport? And as I always say, and tell me goddammit, this is not based on reality. Any game your heart's desire will be the next big multi-million dollar esport. If you want to see Nike and Gatorade sponsoring a worldwide Pong tournament using the original 2600, well, not even the original 2600, like the original Sears catalog like Pong machines, go for it. So please, dear listener or viewer, leave your response on the video version of this episode, or you can call, text, tweet, or email. All of the links are available in the description below. So go have at it. What's going to be the next great esport? Doesn't matter if it'll ever happen in the real world. Just have fun with it. And maybe you really might feel that this would be a good esport. So go ahead. And tell me, goddammit. Alright, now usually we go to the hype train from here, and then the chart park, and then strong history, but for this week, I want to have a bit of a rant. And I just want to get this out of the way right here. The subject I'm about to talk about shouldn't be important, but it is. If you're completely confused as to why I'm talking about it, I share your confusion. But still, we need to address this. So, over the past week, there's been a growing controversy on social media and just on general blogs regarding video game journalism, which really shouldn't be that big of a surprise. This ironically happened the exact same week as Zoe Quinn released her brand new book, Crash Override, which of course details her years and continued harassment that she receives from the online hate group Gamergate, which of course was all done in the name of ethics and game journalism. Yeah. Anyway, so what exactly happened this week to cause such a stir? What made people, so many people, cry out against the institutions that cover game culture? It was a 26-minute video of Cuphead, the 2D action shooter. Yes, really. But it wasn't so much the game, but how it was being played. You see, the video was captured during the Gamescom event in Germany last month, and the player appeared to have a lot of trouble completing the tutorial before eventually bailing on the first stage less than a quarter of the way through. This player was completely unable to adapt to the circumstances that were being thrown at him. His character died repeatedly, And this is quite honestly the entire story. Someone was really bad at a video game. However, this caused a firestorm online, or whatever you'd want to call a group of angry people tweeting and commenting insults over and over and over again into decrying the institutions, whatever. Now, why is that? Well, that's because the player was none other than Dean Takahashi. He's from VentureBeat. I know what you're thinking. Who is that? Well, that's probably because Dean has largely been, more of a writer than an on-screen personality. No, he's broken big stories, but he's never been much of a public figure. In the arena of, YouTube stars and streamers, Dean has just been a journalist, a writer. He types, he prints, it goes online. He's not somebody that you're going to hear on a podcast. Maybe he does podcasts. I don't know. I wasn't able to find anything. Maybe he does. But he's probably best known for his work about Xbox. He actually wrote 2 books about Xbox, the first one being about the original Xbox, and then the other one that was about the brand new Xbox 360. He released it in 2006, less than a year after the Xbox 360 came out, and it mostly detailed Microsoft's approach to the new console. Now, by all accounts, you would assume that he had a horse in the console race. Maybe he's like an Xbox fanboy, but no. He's just a journalist. By no means dispassionate. He does write reviews from time to time, but for the most part, his career is always focused on finding the story, reporting it, or finding the story, writing it, and then reporting it. And the best example of this is his work in 2008? 2009? 2008? I don't know the exact year, but his work regarding the Red Ring of Death. Now, this is when the Xbox 360s were dying left and right. I'm going to say it was 2008 because yes, Dean chronicled all of these events in an article, and he highlighted that Microsoft's poor manufacturing was causing the consoles to overheat. Now, that might seem like a no-duh, like big deal. It's 2017. Microsoft did a bad job with the Xbox 360, and that's why all those consoles died. We know that. But back then, it was really unclear what was happening with the Xbox 360. Sure, people's consoles were dying, but Dean was the very first to point out that this was not, in fact, a user error. It was not an odd quirk. It was not some sort of fault of the manufacturing over at the factory, but this was completely the fault of Microsoft's rush to market. This was a bad design. By then, Microsoft had already extended the warranties and paid out nearly $1 billion. But this was the story that had evidence, that had proof, that basically said, nope, this is Microsoft's doing. Look at the way they're upgrading their chips. They're introducing the Falcon chip. This is all Microsoft's fault. There is no doubt about this anymore. It was a pretty big story back then. Now, according to some people online this week, Dean shouldn't be part of video games journalism. Even though he's a nearly 30-year veteran of the industry, even though he's broken huge stories, he has no business covering games because he wasn't very good at Cuphead. And here we are again. The notion of getting good. The idea that your worth in video game culture as a whole comes down to your ability. If you're not a living, breathing promo reel, you have no business in the business. How can you even comprehend reading a quarterly report if you can't beat a level in Cuphead? How dare you report a well-researched article if you aren't on the same level as me and my friends when it comes to Overwatch? Sure. Now, I could read you a few of the responses he receives on YouTube and elsewhere, but I'm not going to because most of them are just plain boring and others are so offensive, I don't want to repeat them. And any defense so far I've seen of Dean on Twitter was shortly followed by a bunch of petty insults and these faux pleas for intellectual debates. Why can't we just talk about the issues after just saying some really far out offensive shit where you knew that person was just no, you can't you can't plead for logic after saying illogical things about another human being. That's not how this whole thing works. And of course, I saw the comment that I always see, I wouldn't trust a car reviewer who didn't know how to drive a car. What? Are games and cars really that similar? Do you really think that, the difference between driving a minivan and driving a compact car is like that is different as, I don't know, playing Unreal Tournament and playing Super Mario Brothers? Really? They're that different? I don't know about that, man. I really don't. And besides that, one is a product, which might have artistic influences, but the other is definitely art, right? Whatever. But the one comment that really stuck with me about this whole scenario was one that I received personally on Twitter, and here's what it said. And I'm not going to actually say who said it because that would be rude. I'm not trying to put anybody on blast. What they said was, quote, if game journalists would just say, hey, our bad, this stuff would be over right away. End quote. Okay, sure. It's all Dean's fault. If he would just admit it was his bad for being bad, it would all go away. Of course, this person was completely unaware of the source of the video, the 26-minute video, because it was an article by Dean called, this is the name of the video, this was the name of the article that had the video, it was called My 26 Minutes of Shame with an Old-Time Cartoon Game. Even in the first sentence, Dean states, quote, I suck at Cuphead, end quote. Well, that's weird. How'd that person not know about that? Well, probably because it's not mentioned in any of the dozens of hot take YouTube videos, where people are screaming and rallying against this person. They don't actually talk about where it came from. They don't really talk about the person. They just talk about the video and just go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Oh my God. See, like, this is like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Because they just want to express some sort of fucking emotion without actually talking about the actual issue. And of course, their videos are popular because they're videos, because their viewers don't read. They don't actually go out of their way to actually find this article. And of course, these are going to be hot takes because they're loud, and loud means viewers. And angry, I guess, on YouTube means intelligence. And every single story, of course, needs a villain. It can't just be a dry expose about conflicting scenarios. There needs to be a good guy and a bad guy. And that villain, once again, in these videos, is the video game press. And think for a moment. Think where this is coming from. It's a bunch of smaller websites and blogs that want to replace that industry, that want to replace those bigger websites, which isn't all that uncommon in almost every other industry. Think about film, music, fashion, anything really. Blogs have overtaken traditional print magazines. But the difference here is that these smaller blogs don't go out of their way to outwork the bigger teams. They don't out-research the bigger teams. They just insult them, and they entice mobs of people to join in and insult them too. And while communities should react to something that they find disagreeable, there's no moral ground here. Some guy sucked at playing Cuphead. He said in the first sentence that he sucked at playing a video game, and now people want him fired from the industry he spent nearly 3 decades in. The hardcore gamers want to push someone out who's devoted his entire professional life to video games because of a 26-minute video, because he wasn't good at a game, and because he admitted he wasn't good at a game. Think of how insane that is. And that's the problem with these groups. They don't want progress. They want a villain. First, it was about ethics and journalism, which was always completely made up. And if you're like, why are you bringing that up? Trust me, go on Twitter. They're all too keen to relight the fire of this whole controversy. But here we have one of the best, most straightforward journalists. It used to be about ethics and journalism, right? We have a journalist right here. He researches, he reports, and he also happens to suck at a video game. And suddenly, it's not about journalism anymore. Journalism isn't important, it's skill. And when it's done being about skill, and when it's done being about journalism, I'm sure it'll be about something else, because it's always about something else. And that's why there's no conclusion to this story. There's no way to neatly wrap this up, at least not yet, because the problem rarely is the developer, or the publisher, or the journalist, it's the audience. Now, not all of the audience, but at least the angry ones. But there is good news. Every single day, more people are discovering video games. More people are becoming engaged with video games. More people are becoming engaged with video game YouTube. And over time, this is going to dilute the effect of these hot take artists, because not everyone wants to be mad. Now, make no mistake, they'll still be there. They'll be finding their next target, and they'll have their pathetic followers who will rather scream at a stranger on Twitter than work out their own personal issues. But every day that's going to be less and less, because video games are entertainment. And everyone knows that. They're meant to be enjoyable. Some people say they're meant to be fun. I don't exactly agree with that, but they're meant to be engaging and entertaining. They're not meant to be whatever the fuck this is. I don't even know. But video games are meant for whoever wants to play them, no matter how good they are. And if that particular person can play the video game kind of, or whatever, but more importantly, if they can write, if they can get sources, if they can get facts, no matter what their skill is in one game, if they can do all those other things, if they can write, they belong in journalism. And that's the end of the story. All right, sorry to get so serious about that last topic, but it really matters to me. It really, really matters. And if you're like, well, aren't you kind of making a villain yourself? Let me tell you something. I'm talking about a sentiment. I'm not talking about actual people. That's why I didn't name names right there. Because all that matters to me is just being like, hey, This is a bullshit attitude. Knock it off. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to put anybody on blast. I'm not going to call anybody out directly unless they did something really fucked up. And that's also something else. Like, I don't see the need of, like, going after random strangers, like, on the internet, unless they are what you would consider a public figure. And, I just don't want to talk about Total Biscuit. Fuck that guy. So, whatever. Anyway, ooh, do you hear that? Well, that sounds like a good segue. Let's just make silly train sounds instead. Boop, boop. That's right, it's time for the Hype Train. Feel the PR vibrations as we barrel towards Video Game Satisfaction Station on the Hype Train. This is the part of the show we talk about those upcoming video games and events to get you hyped up to spend all your money and become a video game guru. And, well, let's start off with a story that I can really get behind. After months of rumors, which, to be honest, sounded completely unbelievable to me, L.A. Noire is actually being re-released this fall. I guess you could say almost like a remaster. I don't know. We'll get into it in just a moment. But this is the 2011 Rockstar title, and it will be coming to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, as well as additional platforms on November 14th. And I said additional platforms because that's really where the bigger story is. For the first time ever, Rockstar is going to be releasing a game on the Nintendo Switch. Oh, baby! Which I guess shouldn't be a huge surprise considering the Switch is only 6 months old. You know, it's not like we expected them to be at a launch title, but you know what? This is still pretty cool. Anyway, Rockstar also announces that there's going to be a new version of L.A. Noire for the HTC Vive called L.A. Noire: The VR Case Files, which is going to be completely rebuilt, from the ground up to create a new version of L.A. Noire, except it's going to be in virtual reality. It's possible that this could come to other platforms, but so far the only system that's been confirmed so far is the HTC Vive, which I assume has a lot to do with the room scale, because in the game you walk around and you pick up objects, whereas like the PlayStation VR and the Oculus Rift are mostly like seated experiences. Anyway, so let's take a break in this story, because I am unbelievably excited for this. See, remember last week when we were talking about Arkham City and Tell Me Goddammit, and I said that 2011 was one of my favorite years in video games? Well, this right here, L.A. Noire, is my favorite game of 2011. I remember other people being like, Skyrim is so good, or Saints Row is so good, or what else was Portal 2 was out there. Oh, this is so good. And for me, I was like, no, L.A. Noire. Fucking A. L.A. Noire is the best game of the year. Now, in case you're not familiar, L.A. Noire takes place in the post-war era of the late 1940s, and as the name implies, this all is set in the city of Los Angeles, which wasn't in the best shape at the time. Like, the industries were growing at a rapid pace, but so was crime and drugs and murder and all sorts of bad stuff. So you play as Cole Phelps, who's like this straight-laced, no-nonsense beat cop who just the facts, ma'am, kind of attitude, and he quickly works his way up the LAPD. Now, in each of the chapters, you are in a different division of the LAPD, such as arson and murder, and you take on around like 4 cases, and you need to go around an environment and pick up clues and inspect everything. But the most memorable part about this game is the interview segments, or I guess you could even say they're interrogation segments, because, well, police work was kind of different. Like, there's a lot of gray areas for police work in L.A. Noire. So you could select from a series of questions based off of what you found during the investigation, and then you would judge the person's reaction and see if they were telling the truth. And if you missed a clue, you might not be able to prove that they were lying. Like, oh, you didn't find that cup, so you can't be like, we found the cup. And then he's like, I did it. I murdered 39,000 people. And you're like, haha. All right, pretty cool as is, right? But this game got a lot of attention for its facial capture technology. Actors actually sat in chairs and had their faces recorded into a computer, and then then a texture was sort of wrapped around the model and designed, and then bam, their actual facial performance was in the game, and it was stunning for the time. And I still think it looks pretty damn good, but some people are like, oh, that doesn't hold up. No, I thought it was pretty amazing back then. In fact, a lot of the cast from Mad Men is in the game. So if you're a fan of that show, you'll actually like walk into a bar and interview somebody that's like, cleaning up the bar, kind of like an episode of Law and Order, and they'll look up and be like, holy shit, that's the guy from Mad Men. That's at least what I've been told. I've never actually watched the show. I've heard it's good though, but whatever. Anyway, but Rockstar has announced this port will feature some enhancements, at least on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One version. Here's what they said, quote, enhanced lighting and clouds. I love when they include, and clouds, which is great. Why not? Why not? If they've got better clouds, let's get the better clouds. New cinematic camera angles, high resolution textures, and more, end quote, as well as 4K support for the Xbox One X and the PlayStation 4 Pro. While the Nintendo Switch version has its own unique gimmicks, and I do mean gimmicks, there's nothing wrong with having a gimmick, but here's what they said, quote, a Joy-Con mode with gyroscopic gesture-based control, HD rumble, and new wide and over-the-shoulder camera angles, plus context touchscreen controls for portable detective work, end quote. Isn't that nice? It seems like they're really putting in the work here. And if you're wondering, motion controls, what do we need motion controls for? Well, if I had to guess, it's because when you're investigating the areas, you pick up items and then you turn them over until you find a clue. So I assume that's kind of what you'll be doing. You'll be treating the Joy-Con like the object that's in Cole Phelps' hand, which is kind of cool. But you probably noticed that they didn't mention anything in all of these improvements about frame rate, which seems kind of odd for a 6-year-old game. It was released in 2011, it's 2017. Actually, it's about 6.5 years at this point. But I have a guess as to why that might be. You know, you see, the game, when it was released in 2011, was locked at 30 frames per second on every single platform. Even on the PC, it was locked at 30 frames per second. So a bunch of modders were like, fuck this, let's make a mod and make it go at 60 frames per second or uncapped. And they did. They did. It was a total success. But the only problem was, while the world was in 60 frames per second, the facial capture still displayed at 30 frames per second because that's all of the data that it had. It wasn't like just like, you know, model animation. It was actual recorded performance, and all the information that they had was at 30 frames per second. So they couldn't really bump that up. And, you know, that has me really curious about the VR version, because you can't really play a VR game at 30 frames per second. And if the rest of the world is like at 120 frames per second, like it should be in an HTC Vive game, and then you look down and there's a 30 frames per second face, that's nightmare fuel right there. You might just vomit. I'm not even joking. So, will they go all the way back and find the original files and bump them up? I mean, hopefully, because that's the whole gimmick of LA Noire. It's not like you can just get rid of the facial animations and have the exact same experience. Like, you are looking directly at someone to figure out if they're lying. That was like the whole point of the game. But this really begs the question, why now? Like, why is LA Noire the game that they're going to remaster? Because it sold good enough, apparently, back in 2011, but it really wasn't up to Rockstar's usual standards. It was like the best, or the 8th best-selling game over in the UK in 2011, so that's something, but it wasn't even in the top 10 in the United States. And now you look at like the top 10 for like the past 5 years, and Grand Theft Auto 5 is always there, right? You know? And LA Noire really, it's been forgotten by most people. Like, people remember it now, they're like, oh, I remember that game, but unless you're a diehard fan like me, who was actually following what was going on with Team Bondi, the developers behind the game, who eventually closed, I think about 2 years ago, and they're working on a game called Whore of the Orient, and it was really exciting, and then it got canceled. Like, unless you're one of those weirdos like me, well, you probably don't recall LA Noire, but I will say, this remaster is probably because, well, first of all, Rockstar can make money off of it, obviously, and people know what they're getting, actually, this time, because back in 2011, a lot of people were hyped for LA Noire because they assumed that they were going to get some sort of Grand Theft Auto in the 1940s. That was never going to be the case. It's really not that much of an open world game. It's really impressive, but it's not. You can't just get out of your car and take out your gun. Like, that's just not something. Everyone knows today it's an adventure game, and there's enough information out there that people that get it know what they're getting into. But of course, the biggest story here is that Rockstar is back on a Nintendo console, and to put it bluntly, it's been a minute. See, way back in 2009, they released Chinatown Wars on the Nintendo DS, which sold a whopping 1.3 million copies. Yeah, that's right, a Rockstar game on a console that had 154 million units sold, and they only sold 1.3 million. That's not even including the 3DS. That is just plain awful. In fact, Rockstar completely skipped the 3DS and Wii U generation altogether. So this is a pretty significant get for Nintendo. And as I said, back during the Wii U era, if you have a console like the Wii U or like the Nintendo Switch and you don't have the biggest game in the world, that's a problem. And now, right now, Switch is riding high on first-party titles and first-year hype, but sooner or later, they're going to need those monster third-party hits. And this has led everyone to believe, like, well, okay, we're seeing LA Noire is popping up on this console. Do you think we're going to get Grand Theft Auto 5 on the Switch? Maybe. It really depends on the sales of LA Noire, or I suppose it depends on what the team learns while they're working on it, because that's another thing. This is basically free experience for the Rockstar team. They can just sit there, they can work on this, bring it over to the Switch, and really learn the ins and outs of development on the Switch console. But the problem is that Nintendo has never been a really great place for Rockstar games, and it's really bizarre. It doesn't actually make any sense. They put out awesome things like Bully. They had Bully on the Wii. It didn't sell. They had Chinatown Wars on the DS. Awesome game, but the response was equally muted. And usually Rockstar games are so hardware demanding that they can't usually be ported to a Nintendo console, so they have to be very picky with their projects. So they'll drop something like Manhunt, but they're not going to bring over Grand Theft Auto 4 on the Wii. You know what I mean? But given that Grand Theft Auto 5 was on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, it's safe to assume that the Switch could easily handle it. Would it sell? Well, who knows? I know that sounds crazy, but really, who knows? Rockstar's track record would indicate no, but maybe finally Nintendo fans would be willing to play a Rockstar game, or at least buy it on a Nintendo console. But yes, beyond all that, beyond all the hypothetical business shit, I'm really excited for LA Noire. It's an amazing game. You will love it, or maybe you won't. Some people don't. It's actually pretty divisive, but I enjoyed it. Anyway, toot toot. Hey, who wants to talk about race and gender? Yeah, me either. But that's what our next story is about, because South Park: The Fractured Butthole has a very unique feature that was revealed earlier this week. So they put out a video, I think it was Eurogamer, they were doing like a Let's Play thing, and apparently when a player starts a brand new game, they're able to design their own South Park character, much like you could in the Stick of Truth, the game from 2014. Now, much like the first game, you can add facial hair and, you know, details, clothing, you can change the color of your hair, but it's the final option that's really causing a stir. See, the difficulty selection screen changes the color and race of your character. So easy mode is like pale white, and the hardest mode is like a deep brown skinned person. Though in the video, you can actually hear Cartman say, "Don't worry, this doesn't affect combat, just every other aspect of your whole life." That's what he says. Now apparently you can also select your gender, though I haven't really seen a video of this. You can either play as like a cisgender dude, or you can play as a cisgender girl, and so like the dude has it easier than the guy, presumably, or you can play as a gender non-conforming person, which you know, it's interesting, but those are the three options right there. Now, it's also worth pointing out that they put sex and gender in the same box that you select, which is totally incorrect, but whatever. That's besides the point. Anyway, and real quick, I know that people say white, but white people aren't white. I'm white. I'm not white. I'm pink. You ever notice that? We're all pink. If you're a white person, you're pink. You're a pink person. Like, they don't want to call themselves pink, though. Like, this weird fleshy pink. You see the crayon that was called Flesh that was, like, for white people? It's pink. We're pink. I want to be a pink person. That sounds fun. Anyway, so that's really the whole story right there. And the response has been prepared, I guess is the best way to put it. So far, I haven't seen too many people actually respond to the news. More that people are responding to the response to the news. Like, seriously, I was on Twitter a bunch this week, and I saw a lot of tweets that boiled down to, "I bet the SJWs will hate this," which is an odd thing to say, you know? I actually saw one person say, and I'm not even making this up, this is an actual quote I saw online, that said, well, it's not an actual quote, but God, I wish I knew exactly where I had that from, where he said, "Oh, you know, the SJWs are going to attack this for being racist." And I mean, it is racist, but it's also true. And it's like, what? What are you saying? Like, what are you trying to, what are you mad at? What are you talking about? So, is this a good thing, or is this a bad thing? Well, since we're talking about South Park, how about we say it's both things? No, it's not a good, how about both sides are bad? And just give me like 22 minutes to act like I'm the smartest person in the room. I mean, of course, until I discovered that my disaffected audience voted for a particular candidate, and then I'm not going to shit on that candidate, even though I'm an equal opportunities offender. I'm just going to have this one thing that I'm not going to touch because I'm worried that it's going to affect my ratings, or affect my fan base. Funny how that works. Whatever, that's a side note. Anyway, I don't really know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but personally speaking, I don't really trust South Park to be able to handle issues like this. And I don't like the idea, I don't like this hypothetical idea of people online or in real life like bragging like, oh, I played that game and I played as a black person. Yeah, like I don't like that. That makes me like really uncomfortable because I don't know where that person's coming from, if it's supposed to be like ironic or something. You know, I don't like that, you know? And here's the thing, we don't actually know if the difficulty really does change in any meaningful way. Maybe that's just a joke. Like they just put that in there just to kind of mess with people. But if it is something that actually affects gameplay, I don't really like the idea that you're essentially punished for playing as a person of color, because video games in a lot of ways are meant to be, you know, escapism, and just being like, oh, you want to play as a black person? Well then, no, because we're going to make the game more difficult. You know, like that's kind of bullshit, right? But let's really break this down. Let's break down the intention here. So even if it doesn't affect actual gameplay, the idea behind the joke is centering around white privilege, like the idea that being white in America allows you more opportunities for success and the benefit of doubt in failure. Like the way you simply look causes people to treat you differently. They make different assumptions about the way that you behave, the way that you talk, the kind of music you listen to, your political leanings. They are making snapshot judgments just based off of the way that you look. And they're also giving you like leniency in some ways. You might not realize it until, you know, you see the way some people react. I don't know. And that really shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, because I'm sure everyone that's listening or watching this has had that awkward moment where they realize that, you know, a person they just met is like superimposing a type of personality on them. Like they have specific expectations about who you are, and it's not true, and it's really uncomfortable. Now, balloon that into an entire, like a bunch of different races in America, and the whiter you are and the more advantages you have here, that's basically what it is. Being white in real life is an easy mode. You can't deny it. Even if your life is hard, it's an easy mode. Now, we're not going to go through an entire sociological experiment or anything like that. Let's just skip that. So, here's what I want to get to though. Is the joke South Park is trying to make about white privilege? And if so, what part? And it's that uncertainty that has made me really the fuck uncomfortable. See, a racist can look at that screenshot where like Cartman's like, that's hard mode, and he goes, oh, it'll just affect every other part of your life or whatever. And a racist can look at that and they could laugh at it too. Because in their fucked up concepts and their fucked up worldview that is completely incorrect, they would see that a white person, of course, that's an easier mode because the white character is superior because they are white supremacists. Do you see what I'm saying right here? That it is impossible to actually just take that joke and actually learn anything about white privilege. Now, some might say that that's like taking it a step too far, but if you've watched the news recently, people aren't exactly shy about what they think about different races. It's really fucked up. Well, let's be honest. White people are not afraid about what they think about different races as of late, and it's really fucked up. And sure, like, I'm not trying to look at Matt and Trey Parker and be like, it's your job to educate your audience, which potentially will have racist people, about the concept of white privilege. That's not their job. But if you're gonna bring it up and you have something to say, you know, you gotta say something, because even not saying something is saying something, if you know what I mean. And to address the gender options, like the idea of having like non-conforming gender, if this is how they're handling like the race joke, I'm not optimistic about gender. But here's the thing, this is really the most important thing. I could be wrong, but more importantly, and this is the honest truth, hear me out, this is the biggest takeaway, this is the thing you really need to understand, it doesn't fucking matter what I think. It really doesn't matter what I think, because I'm a white dude, so I can be offended, and you know, and I'll admit it, like I'm a hard left-leaning dude, but if I decide right now to just like stop thinking about race altogether, I could just bam, I don't have to think about race anymore. Awesome. And there's no adverse effects. There's nobody that's going to confront me on the issue of race. I'll never be reminded of it. I'm on easy mode. That's my option. But I worry that other white dudes will just see this as a swipe at the social justice warriors without ever considering what it actually means. And I'm also worried that the creators of South Park aren't really going to be able to follow through with this. I'm just saying. Whatever. If you want to know more about white privilege, there are way better people to listen to than me. Anyway, toot toot. Alright, show of hands. Who remembers El Shaddai Ascension of the Metatron? Well, not many, I assume. I can't actually see you. That's not how previously recorded media works. Then again, I suppose I actually asked the question in the first place for a show of hands, so I guess that's really on me, but whatever. Anyway, well, in case you don't know, El Shaddai was a game based on the Book of Enoch. Long story short, the Book of Enoch was part of the Bible before it was taken out, because basically the Bible went through like a millennium-long workshopping class before it finally became the book that we know today. Anyway, El Shaddai was a pretty neat little action platformer, not terribly deep, but it had a story and a visual style that really made it stand out. You were basically playing as an angel that was hanging out with Satan, and Satan was answering a phone and talking to God, because this is before Satan fell from grace. It was really bizarre. It was only on the 360 and the PS3, and it only sold like 500,000 copies. And it's remained relatively obscure to this day. But that didn't stop director... Now, what's the name of the director here? Sawaki Takayasu? Sawaki? Yeah, let's go with that. Takayasu. Alright, cool. He's making a sequel for the game. Now, I know what you're thinking. How do you make a sequel to a book of the Bible? Well, you don't, but you kind of do, but not really. It's going to be a weird game. It's called The Lost Child, and it's been announced for international release in Europe and North America. And in it, you'll be playing as a journalist who must take on angels and demons to find the source of a series of murders. Spooky stuff. Now, from the look of the screen shots, this will be more akin to a Japanese role-playing game than an action game. And I gotta say, I'm surprised this game exists at all. I'm not surprised that's coming to America, because I think the bulk sales did come from its Western release. But it's one thing to produce like an indie game in America or in Japan, but creating a $60 boxed game based off of a book of the Bible and then having it bomb and then being like, well, we're going to make a sequel and it's also going to have a physical release in America. That is crazy. Now, I did enjoy El Shaddai for what it's worth. It didn't blow me away in terms of gameplay, but there was a certain vibe to the game that was like, I don't know, it was so good. There was a universe that was all its own. Like I've never played another game, even in the indie space, that felt like El Shaddai. And I was looking at my copy yesterday just because it's like, oh, man, I should stream this or replay this or something. Now, I'm not sure if that general sentiment is because of the genre or if it's because of the tone. Like that vibe that they got, was it because it was so dreamlike and it was an action game, or was it just so dreamlike that's where the tone came from? Because I know I sound like I'm rambling a little bit, and I am, but I'm a little worried that it being a JRPG might cause it to lose something, because like a dreamlike JRPG, I played a lot of those, but like a really dreamy, far out there, trippy action game, there's not many of those. But I guess we'll wait and see. Still, I'm really happy to see that's coming here to America. So very, very cool. Toot toot. Hey, remember Sawaki Takayasu? Sawaki Takayasu. Remember the guy we were talking about the last story, the guy who directed El Shaddai? Well, he's back in this story too, and here's what he's got to say. It's kind of an amazing week for somebody that no one ever talks about. Well, he used to work at Capcom. Did you know that? Probably not, because you don't have any idea of who I'm talking about. But once again, that's not a real question. I'm not actually asking you a question. This show has gone off the rails. I really screwed up. Anyway, he did work on Devil May Cry, he did work on Steel Battalion, and he worked on the subject of our next story, 2006's Okami, which is a very cool game. And after last month's rumor that Okami is going to be remastered for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC, we now have an official rating from the Korean ratings board, which are basically like the ESRB or PEGI, you know. Now, this doesn't actually give any details to the game beyond the fact that it is like an HD version, I assume. I don't know, whatever. But we do have a lot of rumors from last month, and this does lend some credibility to that. So last month, what we learned was that we'll be seeing boxed copies of Okami sometime around December 12th, which is kind of crazy. Now, in case you don't know, if you're like, what the fuck is Okami? Why do you keep mentioning it? It is widely regarded as a masterpiece. It is a Zelda-style game made in the art style of ancient Japan paintings, or ancient Japanese paintings. It's amazing, and sadly, it hasn't been played by that many people, so this is a great chance for more players to get a crack at it. As for the rumor, like, is this really going to happen? Are we really going to have Okami on store shelves this December? I'm going to say the release date, maybe, I don't know, but will it actually get a physical release? Is this going to happen? I'm going to say definitely yes, because they already released the game on the PlayStation 3 like 5 years ago. I can't imagine how difficult the port job would be. Not to mention, as I always mention every time we talk about Capcom, they need to make up for Street Fighter V and Dead Rising 4's bad sales. Like, every projection they've made for individual titles, Capcom has painfully undersold, with the one exception being like the Monster Hunter franchise. So, quick cash, already an awesome idea. That makes perfect sense to me. But the idea of having physical copies also makes a lot of sense. Because here's the thing about Capcom. I was thinking about, like, why exactly is Capcom re-releasing so many physical versions of games? of older titles instead of just having them be exclusively on the PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, Steam, and the eShop. And I think it's because they got really spooked by Umbrella Corps, which of course was the digital-only multiplayer shooter that bombed out of the gate. Not a great game, but I thought it had some interesting ideas. But I think this is why you're seeing every single one of these Resident Evil re-releases getting a physical run. Now, it costs more for Capcom to actually put out those physical units, but I think a lot of their fans, the people that are more enticed by Capcom properties, are a little bit older and they prefer physical items. So either they can release it on, PSN for cheaper, but they don't get that many sales, or they can spend more money, put some boxes on shelves, and actually make some goddamn money. Makes sense. Speaking of which, toot toot, Resident Evil Revelations was just released on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One last month, and now we know that the Nintendo Switch version will arrive on November 28th. If you buy a physical copy of the game, it's going to cost $40, but there's actually a good reason. See, on the Switch, you're not just going to get Resident Evil Revelations 1, you're also going to get Resident Evil Revelations 2, which is kind of cool. But if that sounds like a little bit too much Revelations for you, you can always buy the game separately on the eShop for $20 each. Now, unless there's some major, amazing new feature on the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 versions, like that just came out last month, I would say playing Resident Evil Revelations Part 1 is probably best played on the Switch, because it was designed for the 3DS, which means that it was designed to be a portable game, and the Switch is a portable console. It's awesome. You'll love it. Also, Resident Evil Revelations 2 is a really fun game. And Part 5 and Part 6, well, those weren't my favorites, but Resident Evil Revelations 2, it actually made me a little bit more optimistic about the series. Great. I need some water and fast. Toot toot. And lastly on the hype train, our most controversial story of the week, Nintendo has officially changed Mario canon. I'm going to give you guys a moment to prepare yourself. Mario has retired officially from plumbing. He's no longer a plumber. He's no longer going out there in the pipes and using his wrench and all that kind of stuff. It's just depressing. I'll give you a moment to think about that. It's just sad. That's right, Nintendo went ahead and changed Mario's bio on the official character page website. It states, quote, that Mario is all around sporty, whether it's tennis, baseball, soccer, or car racing. Mario does everything cool. As a matter of fact, he also seems to have worked as a plumber a long time ago, end quote. Now, we need to discuss how this fits in the Mario timeline, because Miyamoto stated last year that Mario is 26 years old. Now, we need to figure out exactly what does a long time ago mean. Now, I'm going to be lenient here and say that maybe it was like 6 years ago, so maybe Mario was a plumber when he was 20 years old. But this begs the question, when did Mario stop being a plumber? Was he a plumber in Donkey Kong? I don't think so. I think he was being a carpenter. And was he a plumber in Donkey Kong 2 or Donkey Kong Jr.? Nope, he couldn't have been, because he was being a zookeeper. Now, in Donkey Kong 3, he was an exterminator. Hold on there. That was actually not Mario. That was Stanley, not Mario. Totally different character. So does this mean, in canon, Donkey Kong happened like 5 years ago? Maybe. That's bonkers. Anyway, let's find out where the games that are going to be coming out this week. On Tuesday, NASCAR Heat will be out on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. I'm sorry, that's NASCAR Heat 2. Is that a good NASCAR game? I don't know. I've heard that the NASCAR fans were optimistic about the very first NASCAR Heat, so hopefully it worked out for them. Ys 8 Lacrimas of Dana is going to be on the PlayStation 4, Vita, and PC, which is very, very cool. Pro Evolution Soccer 2018 will be on the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 3, Xbox One, Xbox 360, and PC. Yeah, really, we have an Xbox 360 game on this list, which is 12 years after that console came out. That's insane. We have Rayman Legends Definitive Edition, which is going to be out on the Switch. We have Happy Dungeons, which is going to be on the PlayStation 4. We'll see how happy they are. We have Manifest 99, which is going to be on the PlayStation 4. We have the Inside Limbo Double Pack for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It's a physical release of Inside and Limbo for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Inside is one of the best games I played last year. You absolutely need to play that. On Wednesday, we're going to have Samurai Riot on the PC. On Thursday, Baja Edge of Control HD will be on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. I've never heard of that game, so I don't know how it has an HD version, but good for them. Divinity Original Sin 2 is going to be on the PC, and Semi-Spheres is going to be out on the Nintendo Switch. Now, on Friday, we have Dishonored Death to the Outsider. No, Death of the Outsider. I thought it was Death to the Outsider. Whatever. That's going to be on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. We have Metroid Samus Returns on the Nintendo 3DS, which is the first Metroid game in 7 years. I want to say so. Samus, other M, whatever the bullshit was. Yeah, I want to say that. NBA 2K18 Early Tip-Off Edition is going to be out on damn near everything. Seriously, they still put out 2K games on everybody. NBA Live is also going to be on the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. Best of luck, NBA Live. I hope everything works out this year. And NHL 18 will be out on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Boop, boop. That's going to do it for the hype train. I gotta be honest, that whole discussion about like race and gender, that kind of fucked me up a little bit, because that's one of those things where like I want to say a lot, but I don't want to just say nothing. I don't want to just like say a bunch of shit and just like not actually have a point to it, because it feels like there's so little said about the subject that actually is like relevant, and most of the irrelevant shit comes from like white people. So I'm just being honest with you. So I don't know. That's not me being some sort of self-hating person or anything like that, but just like there are clearly people out there that are worth listening to, and every time I open up my mouth about it, it's like, oh, why? What am I really going to add to the subject? You know? I don't know, except to be like, you know, there's a lot of shit that we probably don't know if you really think about it, you know? And I'm talking about like as like a white person, you know, because whatever. In fact, I had this encounter recently where I found out that I could easily find out my ancestry. What am I trying to say? I don't even know how to say it. You know, I can find out the whole DNA thing, and then you can find out where like you're from or whatever or anything like that. That happened like a month ago, and I said I didn't want to know. Like the information was available to me. I could actually just look at it, and I said no, I don't want to know. Like I never ever want to know, which seems kind of silly because I understand there's other people out there that are really like, they're happy that they're like, yeah, I'm Irish, or like, yeah, I'm Italian, or whatever it might be, you know? But I don't really care. Like, I don't want to know, because it can't really, like a lot of those attitudes kind of manifest from just sort of like, being pushed out of like centralized society. And I just don't feel like that's like everywhere I go, people are nice to me. So I just don't feel like I need, I never really need to rely on the community for anything like that. I don't know. That's a little bit off the topic of video games. We could talk all about this forever and ever, but more importantly, I'd rather listen to somebody talk about it. I'd rather listen to someone that's really educated on the matter. I'd rather listen to somebody that has some really great points. In fact, there was a fantastic article by The Atlantic that came out this week that really had my mind going. I can't stop thinking about it. If you Google it, I'm sure you'll find it. Anyway, that's a lot of political stuff. I think we need to, that's not politics. People aren't politics. Whatever. We need to step outside. Let's get some fresh air. I know a place that's always warm with the glow of cold hard cash. That's right, it's time for the Chart Park, the land where money grows on trees. Yes, the Chart Park. This is the part of the show we talk about the legal, business, and financial news in the video game industry, and we find out which pet cats on Wall Street are going to tip their top hats towards Lady Luck. Now, one of the biggest stories of last year has come to an end. Back in the summer of 2016, the YouTubers Pro Syndicate and Timar Tien, they were best known for their Counter-Strike Go videos, but a lot of their videos also include a number of advertisements for this mysterious website known as CSGO Lotto. Well, the site allowed users to gamble away their in-game items with an opportunity to actually win new skins for Counter-Strike Go. However, it didn't take long for the internet to realize that Pro Syndicate and Tamar Tien weren't really being played or weren't being paid by CSGO Lotto. They were actually the founders and the owners of the company. It was a huge story. I'm sure you heard all about it. Now, while that might not sound like a big deal, each of these items actually have real world worth. They're actually worth real money, and they can be sold on the internet. And apparently this strange subdivision of business, whatever you want to call it, this industry, it's worth billions of dollars, over $2 billion. So a failure to disclose ownership prior to advertising could be seen as misleading, and so the Federal Trade Commission stepped in to investigate, and the results are not very exciting. So both Trevor Martin and Thomas Castle were both given a warning that any future violation to not disclose would result in a $40,000 fine per infraction. In other words, they got off scot-free. And because the FTC has not punished them, they will never have to claim any wrongdoing for any of these prior incidents. So they can walk away, and legally speaking, they could say, nope, never had a problem with the FTC. There was an investigation. Nope, I don't have to reference this ever in any future business dealings. Now, speaking with Glixel, Maureen, I'm going to mess up this name. Maureen Alhassan? I'm sorry, Maureen. Well, here's what Maureen, the acting chairman of the FTC, said about the incident. Quote, consumers need to know when social media influencers are being paid or have other material connected to the brands exposed in their posts. The action, the FTC's first against individual influencers, should send a message that such connections must be clearly disclosed so consumers can make informed purchasing decisions, end quote. Also, FTC spokesperson Michael J. Katz, sorry, his name was easier, also chimed in to say, quote, the goal of the FTC isn't to be punitive or a draconian agency. We are here to educate consumers about new markets, end quote. Now, it's worth pointing out that the website had, CSGO Lotto has transitioned into new areas such as sweepstakes after Valve threatened to shut them down for, doing the whole gambling thing. And there you have it. The system works, or it doesn't work, depending on who you ask. But I have to imagine, had this been any other avenue other than YouTube, like if it was on the radio or on television, FTC would have handled it differently. They totally would have handled it differently. And there's certainly an element of, insecurity when the chairman of the FTC calls this a warning to everyone else out there, but the warning is just, letting these people off scot-free. They face absolutely no repercussions for their original offenses. But unfortunately, that is sort of the point. There's no precedent set in regard to these sorts of actions on YouTube by individuals, and to avoid any sort of Wild West scenario or sort of legal loophole, they're avoiding the legal case altogether and simply putting out a warning saying, here it is, we're putting down the gauntlet. From now on, if you own something as an individual, you will not be able to get away with doing this sort of stuff. Now, those of you with good memories might recall that Machinima did have to pay the FTC, I forget how much, but Machinima had to pay the FTC for not disclosing that they were being paid by Microsoft and having their YouTubers promote the Xbox One back in 2014. So what exactly is the difference? I don't know. I guess that Machinima is an organization rather than individuals, even if those individuals are running an organization together. Whatever. But yes, this is going to be something that's going to come up at some point in the future. I guarantee you, this is going to be the precedent that is referenced next time that someone actually has to pay out that $40,000. But it's kind of shitty that those guys got away without paying anything, and they're making so much money. Whatever. Anyway, moving on. So last week we were talking about the newly announced Orc Slayer DLC for the upcoming Shadow of War game. Just to catch you up to speed, in Shadow of War you meet up with different allies to take on Sauron, and over the course of the game you build up that army, and some of those people can be purchased as DLC. Now the reason the Orc Slayer DLC was notable was because it was based off of the real-world producer of Shadow of Mordor, the previous game. The dude's name was Michael 4G, and he passed away last year with some type of cancer. I can't remember what it was, but it was really sad. And the purchase of the $5 DLC would benefit the 4G family. Kind of. See, previously we discussed how only $3.50 of the $5 purchase would go to the family. Many assumed that other $1.50 might go to like Steam or PlayStation Network or Xbox Live, like somewhere around there, right? Well, now we've learned that might not be the case either, because according to more fine print, the offer is unavailable in South Carolina, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Alabama, Illinois, and Hawaii. Illinois. Goddamn. Anyway, so what exactly does this mean? Well, the official Shadow of War Twitter page has put out a notice saying, quote, neither WBIE, which is Warner Brothers Interactive, nor Monolith Software, who are making the game, will profit from any sales of the 4G Orc Slayer DLC, regardless of the territory in which the DLC is sold, end quote. Cool. All right, good on them. But what does that mean exactly? Like, if you're in one of those states, who's taking the money? Where's that money going? Is it still going to them? And if it's not an issue, why was that in the fine print in the first place? Was that a typo? Because you didn't say that was a typo. All you said is, we're not taking the money. So who is taking the money? Who's the money? Who is it? Is charity illegal there? What is going on? And sadly, there are no answers right now. Like, I Googled around for a bit. but there doesn't seem to be a solid answer as to why this would be. In fact, half of those states that I mentioned, such as Alabama, Mississippi, and South Carolina, they are in the top 10 most charitable states in America, which would lead you to assume that the laws would favor charity, greatly favor charity, right? But there's no answers right now, well, which is weird. And you have to feel bad for Warner Brothers because they're this giant corporation I mean, sure, they could just give money to the family instead of doing this whole, like, dance around where you have to buy digital items to help out a family that just had a loved one pass away, but, you gotta feel bad for Warner Brothers. Like, there's nothing they can do about it. Seriously, who is taking the money? I want to know. Anyway, let's move on. It's been a pretty big week for Destiny 2. So big, in fact, I wasn't able to find many news stories that weren't about Destiny 2. Obviously, the game was released on Wednesday. Yeah, because they had to be special and not released on Tuesday. Cool. Thanks a bunch, Activision. And it's been fairly well received. Myself included. I really liked it. In fact, by Thursday, Bungie had reported that the game had already sold to millions of users, which is cool. No specific numbers were given, though some people are saying it's like 1.2 million users are on there altogether. Like, not at once, of course. But of course, it wasn't totally smooth sailing. A number of users have vocalized their dissatisfaction with the brand new shader system. Now, in case you don't know, shaders allow users to create or basically color what their outfits look like, giving them a bit of style, if you will. And while the new system allows for a greater degree of customization with individual elements so that you can create, a more vibrant style, which is always good, it's how they're dealing with the shaders that's the problem. See, in the previous game, shaders were something that you attach to an item. Okay, I want to make this thing purple. Whatever it is. Your head, a cape, a gun. I want that gun to be purple. Cool, it's purple now. Great. That doesn't look right. I'd rather have the cape be purple. Okay, take the shader, remove it from that, and put on the cape. That's not the case with Destiny 2. Shaders are now disposable items. Use it once, it's gone. And if you change it to a different shader, that's gone too. Want more? You can play more. Go discover more. Or, you can buy them with in-game currency. So how much are these shaders? Well, it's about $5 per shader, though if you do a bulk purchase, that really knocks down the price. Now, the director of Destiny 2, Luke Smith, addressed the controversy actually the day of release. Like, how sad is that? The same goddamn day that you put out your game that you've been working on for all these years, you have to be like, everybody relax about the shaders. Well, here's what he said. Quote, shaders are earned through gameplay, leveling, chests, engrams, vendors. We expect you to be flush with shaders as you continue to play. Full disclosure for myself personally, I don't even know how to add a shader. I don't know if I have any. Anyway, let's continue. When you reach level 20, shaders will drop more often. Vendor rewards, destination play, and endgame activities. Shaders are now an ongoing reward for playing. Customization will inspire gameplay. Each planet has unique armor and shader rewards. With D2, Destiny 2, we want statements like, quote, I want to run the raid, trials, or go back to Titan to get more of its shader, end quote, to be possible, end quote. Well, I guess I guess people will say that. They'll have to, right? Right? This just seems like an unfortunate choice that, won't impact many people. Like me personally, I couldn't give less of a shit. I never see my character. Why would I care? It's a first-person game. But I'm not trying to pull that whole both sides bullshit because I think they're both right to a degree. Like, Destiny 2 looks really goddamn expensive. Like, I've only put in about 14 hours somewhere. I don't know how many hours I've played in the game, but I can't believe how big the environments are and how each of them are designed like meticulously. So if you arrive at that environment from the west or from the north or whatever, it feels like you're entering an entirely new area. Like, there's a lot of design. Clearly, it took a lot of designers to sit down and just think about stuff, and they're getting paid to think about that stuff, so the game got really expensive, not to mention all the people that had to do the voice acting and the music and the animations. It's a really pricey looking game, all right? But at the same time, and so I get it, they have to make up money. It can't just be a $60 game. So yeah, they're going to charge for shaders. That's kind of controversial, but cosmetics are the least controversial thing you can charge for. I think we can all agree there. On the other hand, they broke the old system, which, was a big deal for those Destiny fans, especially if you were a fan of Destiny 1, when you were sitting there and playing that game for 3 years when it wasn't very good. Like, for 3 years, you sat there and you played that game, even though it just didn't really do as much for you as you wanted. And one of the very few areas that you really appreciated were shader customization. And now they're taking that away from you. That sucks. Like, look, the players want to go out there and they want to get loot. Of course they do. Of course they want to go on that raid to get something because it's an MMO. But they sure as hell do not want to do extra busy work just to turn the cape purple. Because now the rest of their clan decided, oh, we're going to be purple now. Great. I have to go and get a shader or I have to spend $5. That's not fair. It's not fun. So it's a no-win situation, especially when the fans weren't able to import their characters. Hey. Well, I say it's a no-win situation, but obviously Activision is going to make a ton of money off of those skins, so whatever. It sucks. Let's move on. Well, there's no other way to put this. There's no way to get into this story. We're going to be talking about Blizzard, because Blizzard is building a goddamn esports arena. The developer announced intentions to build the Blizzard Arena Los Angeles, which presumably will be used to hold a variety of Blizzard events and esports competitions. But it will also apparently open next month? What, for real? Just in time for the Overwatch players to begin their playoff season. In other words, I don't know, don't expect this to be too large? How could it be available in a month? Anyway, however, Blizzard has said this will accommodate multiple broadcasts and broadcast rooms and events at once. So who really knows? Who knows? We just, whatever. This is kind of a surprise. Now, Blizzard must have known about this for years, that they were going to be doing this. It's not like you can just have construction be done in like a month, no matter how much money you have. Like, it takes time to get construction stuff done. You need parts to settle and then build on top of it. That's the only way if you want to actually have a good structure. Now, I suppose Blizzard has had some strong plans for the future of esports, and that makes sense because, you know, they have always had a hand in things like StarCraft and, yeah, I guess Warcraft was an esport? Whatever. But here's the thing. Activision and Blizzard, they're a gigantic company. They're a behemoth. But where else can they go? They already bought a major mobile publisher. But, you know, with King Games. They're working on Hollywood films. They're doing a great job over in China. Alright, so what else are they going to do? Where else can they go? Except to purchase land. Why not? As esports become more popular, I'm sure certain groups would love to hold their events at the Blizzard Arena. It sounds prestigious, doesn't it? But make no mistake here, they called it the Blizzard Arena Los Angeles because there's absolutely going to be more of these in the future. At least I assume there is, otherwise that name is terrible. Anyway, moving on. So whenever we talk about Ubisoft, usually it's for one of three occasions, at least in the chart park. Usually we're talking about financial reports, we're talking about hires and layoffs, or we're talking about Vivendi trying to buy Ubisoft with its hostile takeover. But the good news is, this week we're going to be talking about hires, because Ubisoft has announced plans to greatly expand their presence in the Quebec area, investing $780 million over the course of the next 10 years. Starting off with 125 new hires for this new, and I'm going to mess this up because I'm not Canadian, Sarjuan. Let's really get this one. I can't do it. Sagunia? I don't know. Canada. They're gonna have 125 new hires in Canada. Cool. I don't know how to say that. I'm sorry, Canada. But that's going to happen by 2027. Ubisoft will have 1,000 new hires in the area over the next 10 years. Now, that's all for the news at the moment, and we don't really know what this new division is going to be working on, but I want to just highlight something. This is the 5th new studio Ubisoft is opening in less than a year, or at least the 5th new studio they've announced they're going to open in less than a year. And if you don't believe me, let's count it down. Last November, they announced that they're going to be opening a studio in Belgrade, Serbia, followed by another announcement that they're going to be having a studio in Berlin, Germany, and Bordeaux, France. And then like 3 weeks ago, they had that announcement for the new studio in Stockholm, Sweden. And now we have this brand new studio in the Quebec area. Now, Ubisoft is crazy successful at retail right now. I'm not trying to deny that, and they're also doing a great job in digital sales. And they did bring in nearly $244 million just in revenue just last quarter. That's not profit, that's revenue. And as of right now, right now, they have the 2 best-selling games of the year with For Honor and Ghost Recon Wildlands. But this is a ton of growth for just 12 months. Like, even if it's just announced growth, even if it's just like, oh, we're going to open up a studio or whatever, that's a lot of announcements. Now, we all know that Ubisoft studios work on Ubisoft games, and what I mean is that everyone works on Ubisoft games. Like, Oh, we need somebody to work on eyeballs. Okay, let's send it to Spain. Seriously, it's crazy. Everyone piles on to help for every single project, which is also why Ubisoft has so many leaks, because everybody is in their business. But anyway, this is smart, hypothetically, when you have the 2 best-selling games of the year. But when you don't, when things slow down, are you really going to be able to afford 5 new studios? Like 5 new studios! That's really crazy. So I'm not sure where Ubisoft is coming from, but we'll see. Like I'm not trying to be like, oh, this is a bad idea, because they've announced they're gonna have 1,000 new hires in just one location. Not even talking about the other 4 studios. They've only shut down 1 studio in the past 3-4 years, and that was the one in Casablanca. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Let's take a break from all of the corporate talk and enjoy some funded product placement. Who doesn't love that? Now, over here in America, Splatoon 2 has had these things called Splatfest. You know, they're these events where players have to pick over some competing items such as ketchup and mayo, what's your favorite condiment, or what's your favorite superhero, flight and invisibility. Just really, really goofy things that just make Splatoon a little bit more fun. However, over in Japan, they've joined forces with one of the world's biggest real estate companies, McDonald's. No, really, that's how McDonald's makes money. It's real estate, it's not the food. Anyway, yesterday, Splatoon 2 held a Splatfest centered around 2 McDonald's products, and fans had to choose between French fries and chicken McNuggets. That might sound completely insane, but that's because over in Japan, McNuggets are considered a side. Weirdos. Now, it's totally possible that these sorts of events will remain exclusive to Japan. After all, doing something like this in America would be considered advertising to children. Yes, adults love Splatoon 2, and yes, adults love McDonald's, but I think once you start advertising McDonald's directly to a consumer through a video game, I don't know if that would really fly over here in America, because over in Japan, their perception of corporations just feels different. There's more of a trust in corporations. I don't know why that is. I really don't. I don't. But it seems like a pretty smart idea, because you're forcing players to stop and think about, do I prefer chicken nuggets or do I prefer French fries? And you're thinking about McDonald's. You're actually weighing out your options about what you love more and then picking one. And that's more thought than I put into any commercial. I'm sure it's the same for you. So it's a really smart idea. Anyway, moving on. Now, before we move on to the normal charts, I would like to take a moment. We have some charts right here, which are the best-selling games on the PlayStation Network for the month of August. Now, you might be asking yourself, why have we never done this for Xbox or Nintendo? And that's because they simply don't provide those numbers. I wish they did. We would cover them if they did, but they don't. So we're going to talk about the top 10 games in America and then the top 5 games in Europe, okay? Okay. Here are the top 10 best-selling PlayStation Network games in North America. Starting off with number 10 was EA Sports UFC 2, number 9 was Minecraft, number 8 was Undertale, number 7 was Friday the 13th, number 6 was Grand Theft Auto 5, number 5 was Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, number 4 was Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, number 3 was Sonic Mania, number 2 was Hellblade's Senua's Sacrifice? Hellblade, we'll go with that. And number 1 was Madden NFL 18, which only came out at the very end of the month. That's really impressive. Now, here are the top 5 best-selling games on the PlayStation Network over in Europe. Number 5 was Horizon Zero Dawn. Number 4 was Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. Number 3 was Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege. Number 2 was Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. And number 1 was Hellblade. So, let's start off by looking at the good news. Hellblade had a hell of a good first month, especially considering the competition. Almost all of the competition were really well-established franchises. Now, as for Uncharted: The Lost Legacy being number 1 over in the UK, good news, but I'm kind of surprised to see it so far down in America. I'm eager to see the NPDs for August, just to see if maybe people went with physical purchases here, because Uncharted's a pretty big deal, and, you know, PlayStation exclusives have done well on the NPDs. I don't know, that's just really weird. But let's talk about the biggest loser in the entire month, and it breaks my heart to say, it's Lawbreakers. They were in 14th place, not even in the top 10. And over in Europe, they were not even in the top 20. And that's really bad, because it's been out since the 8th of August, so it had a lot of time to accumulate those sales, and it lost out to a bunch of games that came out, you know, later in the month. And let's not forget that it's also digital only, so it's not like people are going to, you know, to GameStop or whatever to buy a copy, and it's a PlayStation console exclusive. Oh boy, like I said in my review, I really love Lawbreakers, but unless they get a major ad campaign or price cut or something, this is a dead game, because it's online only. There's no single player. If there's no one playing, there's no reason to buy. So, Best of luck. Really fun game. Anyway, moving on. We do have the top 10 best-selling games over in the UK at retail and digitally. Here they are, and this is just for the week, not for the month. Number 10 was Forza Horizon 3. Number 9 was Overwatch Game of the Year Edition. Number 8 was Yakuza Kiwami. Number 7 was Ark Survival Evolved. Survival Evolved? Yeah, that really is the name. That's a bad name. Number 6 was Everybody's Golf. Number 5 was Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. Number 4 was Grand Theft Auto 5. Number 3 was F1 2017. Number 2 was Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. And number 1 was Uncharted The Lost Legacy. Now let's go over to Japan to find out what the 10 best-selling games over there, and the results might surprise you. Number 10 was Resident Evil Revelations on the PlayStation 4. Number 9 was the Snack World Chijaris on the 3DS. Number 8 was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on Nintendo Switch. Number 7 was Dragon Quest 11 Echoes of the Elusive Age on the PlayStation 4. Number 6 was Knights of Azura 2 Bride of the New Moon on the PlayStation 4. I did not realize that was already out. Number 5 is Dragon Quest 11 Echoes of the Elusive Age on the 3DS. Number 4 was Monster Hunter Double Cross on the Nintendo Switch. Number 3 was Etran Mystery Dungeon 2 on the 3DS. Number 2 was Splatoon 2 because that game is doing real well, still doing really, really well, just in time for that McDonald's promo. And number 1 is Everybody's Golf, which sold over 100,000 copies in 1 week alone. Pretty damn impressive. But of course, that's just the games. What is the best-selling consoles over in Japan? Well, I have that list right here. Starting off with the Nintendo Switch with 50,074, PlayStation 4 with 21,419, new 3DS LL with 12,332, new 2DS LL with 11,515, PlayStation 4 Pro with 4,965, PlayStation Vita with 3,975, 2DS with 1,935, new 3DS with 486, Wii U with 116, PlayStation 3 with 85, Xbox One with 78, which means for the 7th week in a row, the Xbox One is in last place. Now think about that for a moment. It lost to things like the PlayStation 3 and Wii U, 2 dead consoles. That sucks. But that's going to have to do it for the Chart Park, the land where money grows on trees. Alright, we've now come to the final segment of the show. This is the part where we take a look back at the week that was 10 years ago and beyond to find out if there's anything worth talking about, and there usually is. It's a little something we like to call Strong History. 10 years ago on the Nintendo DS, Drawn to Life was released. This is a pretty cool little RPG where you actually draw your own main character. Not a great game, but a neat idea, and of course they would make a bunch of them after this, which I know Fifth Cell was involved in that. I think that was one of the projects that got them a lot of money. So it was popular on the DS. Also 10 years ago on the PlayStation 3, Heavenly Sword was released. Now this is one of those games that makes me feel super old. How can Heavenly Sword already be 10 years old? That doesn't even make any sense. This was supposed to be the killer app on the PlayStation 3. Instead, it's more often remembered for being a weird example of product placement. See, on the TV show Heroes, which is on NBC, really short-lived TV show, which I think is making a comeback, there was just this moment in the show where for 18 seconds, you just saw this dude playing Heavenly Sword. It was weird. It was really, really weird. Also, 10 years ago on the Xbox 360, Skate was released. Yep, Skate is 10 years old. But nobody really cares about the very first Skate. It's all about Skate 2 and Skate 3. So let's just move on. 11 years ago on the DS, Mario Hoops 3-on-3 was released. You know what I like about this game? It has everything you need to know right in the title, except for one extremely strange detail. Square Enix made it. Yes, Square Enix made a basketball game starring Mario characters on a handheld. Go figure. Also that same year, on the DS, Cooking Mama was released. Have you ever wanted to make 98 boring recipes on a touchscreen? Well, you might want to. Seriously, I spent a lot of time playing Cooking Mama on the Wii. I don't know why, it was fun. Whatever. 12 years ago, on the PlayStation 2, Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks was released. This was a crazy, fun, awesome co-op game with Liu Kang and Kung Lao. They're the characters from Mortal Kombat. They run around to all the different locations and then just beat the crap out of, like, just these monster creatures and Barakas and stuff like that. The best part is, both of the characters play completely differently, so it adds a ton of replayability. And if you're a Mortal Kombat fan, you're just gonna love it. You absolutely will, because you actually visit all the locations. The only thing that really sucks is that we were supposed to get a sequel with Sub-Zero and Scorpion, but it got canceled. God damn it. That's the worst. 14 years ago, on the Game Boy Advance, Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge was released. Now, there's not much to say here except that it was a Rare game, as in published, or it was developed by Rare, but it was published by Microsoft on a Nintendo handheld, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. 15 years ago, on the PC, Battlefield 1942 was released. Now, If you go out and get yourself a copy of Battlefield 1, it's unlike anything else out there on the market right now. Like, you'll be really impressed by how big the world feels and how many different types of vehicles and weapons there are. Now imagine playing that in 2002, because there was nothing else like it. Maybe Tribes, that's like the closest thing I can think of, but no, Battlefield 1942 took everything to the next level. The only problem was that it required a pretty goddamn good PC and a really good internet connection if you want to have the most fun with it, which not very many people had at the time. Luckily for me, this was the era of the internet cafe, so me and a bunch of friends, we would pay a couple of bucks and spend hours playing Battlefield 1942 on LAN. To this day, it's some of the most fun I've ever had playing a video game. So a couple of years ago, I was like, man, those were some good times. I wonder if there's anyone out there playing Battlefield 1942 now. I mean, I've got the PC for it. Why not? So I booted it up, and it just looked like trash, man. It looked like complete fucking trash. Like, I know people always like to show off how, like, Lara Croft in Tomb Raider 1 looks like compared to the latest Lara Croft, and be like, wow, look how far games have come. No. You don't have to go that far back. Look at Battlefield 1942 versus Battlefield 1. It feels like 50 years has passed. It's crazy. Really, go look at it. Also, in 2002, on the GameCube, Animal Crossing was released, and it's sort of amazing that we ever got this game. It was a late Nintendo 64 game that was eventually released, it was released in Japan on the Nintendo 64, and then eventually came to America on the GameCube. Fun fact, this game will never be re-released as it was on the GameCube because, well, it's not because the game is bad or anything, but because in Animal Crossing, you can actually discover the very best NES games of all time, like Mario Brothers and Punch-Out and things like that. They're all in the game. They're just secret unlockables. There's no way Nintendo is going to give those games away for free in this day and age. You gotta go on the eShop and give them the dollars. Also that same year, and the same week, on the Game Boy Advance, Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance was released. This game tried to make up for Circle of the Moon, but even as a Castlevania fan, the really big sprites with the big overlays and the crappy music, it lacked the gothic details I wanted from the series. Thankfully, Aria of Sorrow was only 2 years away, and that's a real deal awesome game. Also, that same week, in that same year, on the PlayStation 2, Kingdom Hearts was released. Now, I know this game gets a lot of coverage. There's a million YouTube videos you can go and watch about, like, the history of Sora, or whatever. I'm not making fun of anybody, I don't get it. So I'll just mention that there was, of course, the old story that the reason this game got made was because of an elevator ride. Squaresoft's, how do you guys say this name? Shinji Hashimoto, he was a producer, he worked on the Final Fantasy series. He was in an elevator, and he happened to bump into a Disney exec, and he literally gave him an elevator pitch, and that is why we have Kingdom Hearts, which is insane. Like, I always thought elevator pitch was like some old terminology, but no, it actually works. Anyway, 16 years ago, on the GameCube in Japan, Luigi's Mansion was released because the GameCube launched 16 years ago in Japan, which I would like to point out again, it was a really bad selling console, and it launched without a Mario game. I'm just saying that. I suppose I could talk about the GameCube further, but I really don't have that much of attachment to it. Almost every aspect of the GameCube I think was a mistake. I think the controller was a mistake. I think the lack of internet functionality was a mistake. I think using the mini DVDs, I think that was a mistake. I look at the GameCube and I just see a bad console. You know, I think it's a really durable console. Like, you can just throw a GameCube across a room and it still will work fine. I'll give them credit there. But, you know, Super Mario Sunshine, not a very good game. The GameCube library is not that good. A lot of people, they overhype that thing. Now, my personal favorite GameCube game is Killer 7, which made perfect use of the controller, and yeah, like, I'm so happy that the GameCube exists just for that experience, but everything else, I'm like, I'm good. I don't really need it, you know? Alright, that exact same year, and that exact same week, Portal Runner was released on the PlayStation 2. Now, this is a super shitty spin-off of the Army Men games. They had the unfortunate distinction of coming out a day before 9/11, which kind of killed the sales for it because everyone was like, should we spend money or should we just invest in, like, guns and food because is the world gonna end? You know? But it didn't matter because the game sucked. Everyone knew it. But don't tell that to the former head of the 3DO company, Trip Hawkins, because when GamePro magazine gave a negative review for this game, which was like, they gave it like a 5 out of 10, basically. Their system was different, but it boils down to a 5 out of 10. Trip Hawkins actually sent them an email saying this, quote, "There is something wrong with the reviewer, not with Portal Runner. If you disagree with me, you do so at your own peril. I should mention in passing that 3DO has been one of your largest advertisers. Effective immediately, we're going to have to cut back on that." You know why we know about this email? Because GamePro published it. Because sure, GamePro, yeah, they need that advertising dollar, but they're like, fuck you, so just put it online, and everyone made fun of Trip Hawkins for it. Unfortunately, it also created the idea that reviews are purchased, which is not true, and clearly we have evidence that's not true. And yes, Trip Hawkins was right. GamePro would meet its peril 10 years later in 2011, but that's still 8 years longer than the 3DO company who would file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2004? 2005? Somewhere around there. And of course, nobody remembers Portal Runner except for the fact that it was a shitty game. 20 years ago, in the arcades, Mortal Kombat 4 was released. Now, this was the very first Mortal Kombat game where they got rid of the digitized sprites and instead had 3D models, which was totally fucking lame. 22 years ago, on the Super Nintendo, Clock Tower was released. Totally awesome cult classic adventure game. It never actually came to America, but its sequel did, which was also called Clock Tower, which is totally confusing. And that was on the PlayStation 1. This is one of the cornerstones of early survival horror, at least out of Japan. And if you've never seen this game, go and Google it, because there was a character named Scissor Man, who was just a man with a big pair of scissors, and he chops people in half, and it's really, really violent. And you can see the pixel animation for that. It's super cool. Look it up. 24 years ago, on the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, here's the big one. We're going to be spending some time here, so buckle up. We're going to be talking about how, on September 13th, 1993, Mortal Monday happened. Mortal Monday. Because Mortal Kombat was released on the Super Nintendo and the Genesis. Now, I sure as hell remember Mortal Monday. It was all anyone was talking about it. And I do mean everyone was talking about it. Politicians were talking about it. The news was talking about it. Talk show hosts were making jokes about it. Kids and adults, everyone was talking about it. And if you weren't talking about it, you were about to be talking about it because it completely bombarded every television and magazine with advertisements for Mortal Monday. It was amazing. But it's almost easy to forget just how stupid Mortal Kombat was. See, it was made by four nobodies: John Tobias, John Vogel, Dan Forden, and Ed Boon. They were sitting in a room trying to come up with something. It had to have combat in it. They actually were told it needs to have combat in it. Other than that, it was up to them. Something. And like most creative people, their first instinct was to be, well, a bunch of rip-off artists. At the time, Jean-Claude Van Damme's Bloodsport, which is an awesome movie, and it was still really popular in the public consciousness. So they thought, hey, we should rip off that. And also, of course, there was the success of Street Fighter II, which had created a rampant arcade culture that hadn't been seen in years. And so they said, hey, we should rip that off. And then Midway had a string of hits using digitized graphics where people would photograph real-world objects and create sprites out of them instead of a computer. So they thought, hey, why not do that? Even titles that were really bad, like Pit Fighter, they did really well in the arcades just because of that unique visual style. So the first step they thought was, let's get Jean-Claude Van Damme. Because if we can get Jean-Claude Van Damme, this game will be a hit. It will be a Bloodsport video game. So they contacted him, and he said no. Okay. So the second step was to just rip off Bloodsport anyway, and also Enter the Dragon. See, as children of the 1970s, the team had seen dozens of kung fu films, which mostly centered around tournaments. If you've never seen Enter the Dragon, it's a tournament movie. It's badass, it's awesome, it's Bruce Lee, you gotta see it. This also gave the project a greater Chinese influence than Street Fighter. Street Fighter was very Japanese-centric, even though it showed a bunch of the world. But because a lot of those kung fu films came from China, and that's where they were drawing most of their inspiration, it was like more of a Chinese influence than you saw in Street Fighter. Another Midway influence was the violence. See, there were games like Narc and Smash TV, which were packed with cartoonish body parts and bones flying around. But Mortal Kombat would make everything a bit more personal. You see, when Ed Boon was watching Street Fighter to get some ideas, he noted that the way characters would become temporarily dizzy. See, if you got enough hits in quick succession, if you did a really good combo, people would be in a daze. And then that would allow their opponent to engage in a free attack. But the attack wasn't anything new. It was wimpy and ineffective. There you are. You're in Street Fighter, right? Your opponent is dizzy. They're defenseless in every single way, and you walk up to them and you just hit them. You hit them just like you've been hitting them. That's weird. That's stupid. You wouldn't do that. No. Ed Boon was thinking about this. You would do something like, you would like rip their head off, or you would throw your fist right into their chest and you would pull out their still beating heart, just like in that movie scene in Temple of Doom, or their bodies would become impaled with spikes. You would just knock them down to a pit and there'd be blood everywhere. And what if every attack leading up to that murder was just as brutal? Like, you would do some punches and kicks and stuff like that, and there wouldn't be any like real damage, but then you do like a roundhouse kick and just blood would shoot out of the person's head. That would be awesome. At least that's what they thought. And 6 months of digital photography, making costumes, and hiring actors, not to mention all the work already involved in making a video game, Mortal Kombat finally arrived in arcades in North America. And it was, no exaggeration, huge. You see, if you grew up in the arcade age, you were just hitting your teenage years. Sure, Mario was alright, it was cool, Street Fighter was badass, but this, Mortal Kombat right here, this was bigger than games. This was a statement. The games were grown up now. Well, grown up by the standards of like a 13-year-old. That overnight success ensured that the arcade game would be coming to home console soon. But little did anyone realize, this would be the most important release of the entire 16-bit generation. You see, by now it was no secret that Mortal Kombat was full of blood and guts. People were starting to figure out the secrets inside the game to pull off the fatalities, and the things people were seeing, people being burned alive and skeletons and just people being ripped in half. It was insanity. It was crazy. It was like nothing they'd ever seen before. And to create a sort of parental control, the developers of the home console port over at Acclaim, they decided to lock away all of that crimson goopy stuff behind a cheat code. You see, the edgy folks over at Sega had no issue dealing with a lot of blood in their games, so they said, okay, well, yeah, we'll have a cheat code, just in case. Now, Nintendo, on the other hand, was adamant that the most extreme elements be trimmed to the final release. They said, no, we are not going to have any blood on a Super Nintendo game. You have to figure this out. These fatalities will not... They were going through there and saying, no, that's not allowed. Now, keep in mind, up to this point, Sega claimed to be the edgier console, at least more edgy than Nintendo, but now that the SNES was out, there wasn't much of a difference beyond Sonic impatiently tapping his foot or the occasional rap-influenced soundtrack like Streets of Rage and Toe Jam and Earl. But, you know, these were exclusive games. The SNES had exclusive games, and Super Nintendo had exclusive games, Genesis, so yeah, they're like different consoles. Like, Genesis is edgier, I guess, but not really. But Mortal Kombat was available on both systems, and it became the best example of each company's philosophies. The biggest company, or the biggest game in the world, was finally coming home, and Nintendo was telling their customers, you can't handle that game that you played in the arcade, that game that you love so much, and you just want to have a home copy. You can't handle it the way it was. We're gonna make it safer for you and your little brain, whereas Sega was giving you the real goods. Worse yet, all of the blood on the Super Nintendo version was being replaced by sweat, and it doesn't matter how old you were, everybody knew what Mortal Kombat was, and when you saw that sweat, you knew exactly what was missing. It was an even bigger insult. You know, if you're like 13 or something. Now, 2 months after release, Acclaim shipped an additional 3 million copies, which is huge back in 1993. So how did each console version stack up in terms of sales? Well, we don't have exact numbers, but it has since been confirmed that the Sega Genesis version outsold the SNES 5-1. 5-1. Nintendo was mortified. The die was cast. Sega really did everything that Nintendo would not do. Damn it, if only there was a way to shorten that. But the point is, the game became so popular, the United States government would hold a series of congressional hearings regarding video game violence in December of 1993. Now, many will point out that there were other games there, cult classics such as Night Trap, but those were like games that didn't even sell that well. It was no secret that the real reason they were there was because of Mortal Kombat. And of course, Nintendo's Howard Lincoln would proudly point out to the rest of the people of Congress the difference between their family-friendly approach and the reckless behavior of Sega. Now, this resulted in the creation of the Entertainment Software's Ratings Board, or the ESRB, which you can still see on boxes to this day, which of course is run by the Entertainment Software Association, which of course is a powerful lobbying group that had to be formed because of the entire congressional hearing that eventually went on to do other things, including representing companies in lawsuits and also starting E3, because E3 is one of the most important pop culture events of the year, completely reshaping the way that the video game industry approaches their fans and how they approach marketing. And all of this, congressional hearings and Sega Does and Super Nintendo and violence and the way that everything was expanding and the creation of E3, all of this was because 4 men sat around in a room to make something, and instead they just ripped out Bloodsport. And they changed the entire industry. It's hard to imagine where we would be today if those 4 men hadn't sat in that room. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, 32 years ago, this week, over in Japan on the Famicom, Super Mario Bros. Was released. Now, Super Mario Bros., it's a huge deal. But before we talk about it, I just want to say, Nintendo gets way too much credit. Way too much credit. Often things they do have already been done by other people, but in the history books, Nintendo is credited as the creators. It's not fair, but, you know, I don't think it's an overestimation to call Super Mario Bros. One of the most important games of all time. Now, unless you're into arcade-style games, and I do mean like arcade-style games like Frogger or Pac-Man or whatever, anything that's influenced by the pre-NES era, everything else after that, you can thank Super Mario Bros. For, or at least for popularizing. Seriously, I'm not exaggerating. Super Mario Bros. Changed everything because it had multiple pathways, secrets, power-ups. Basically, it had a ton of replayability, and that's why it was insanely popular. It felt like something new. It wasn't confined to the arcade. And the home didn't need to be the arcade. There were things that you could do that would make it long play. You know, play for longer. Enjoy yourself. Maybe even have to come back because you can't finish the game, because there's things to see that you might not see. It wasn't based on old concepts. It was meant to be enjoyed at your leisure, at home. Even though, of course, there was a timer in the game. But the reason I'll always respect Super Mario Bros. Is because just of its game design. The concepts are slowly introduced. They teach the player how to react. Here's a Goomba. Here's a block. Here's a little bit of fire. You know there's going to be more fire later. They teach you these ideas, and then the player eventually learns what they are, and then as the game goes on, they begin to ramp up the difficulty, and they test what you've learned. That's game design, which, you know, most of the time in the arcade, it was just about die, you're dead, you know? They didn't teach you anything because they wanted to get another quarter out of you. And it does this entirely through gameplay. There's no need for instructions, so you could play this game no matter what language you speak, and you would just immediately understand it. So when you lose, you know why you lost. It was on you. You can take that information and you can reapply it in your next playthrough. The game was teaching you everything you needed to do. Now, obviously, it was a smash hit because 32 years later, it's still the 5th best-selling game of all time. Yes, really, the 5th best-selling game of all time, even 32 years later. And really, it was such a good game, it made the NES a must-own in America, and that made the company synonymous with video games. So yeah, Nintendo gets way too much credit, but it's hard to overestimate the importance of Super Mario Bros. But that's going to do it for Strong History. Good show, long show. We need to go. I need to bounce because I am hot. I need to get some more coffee. Whatever. So what do you say we close out the show? What do you got coming up this week? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But if you're interested in following me on Twitter, you can follow me at Dr. Crychop. That's at Dr. Crychop. You can follow the PRESSURECAST at VGADumb on Twitter. Send in your answers for Tell Me Goddammit, and we will talk all about it next week. And I've got some ideas for future projects that I'm going to work on, but I don't want to say anything yet until they get off the ground. So anyway, what was I going to say? Mortal Kombat. At the very end of every single round, you would murder somebody. Their life would end. But the PRESSURECAST will never end because it's not a character in Mortal Kombat, but also because the PRESSURECAST is forever. See you guys.